This is the anterior view of the upper extremity. So the anterior view, the front view of the human arm. We'll begin with the shoulder area. So this is the clavicle that runs across the top up here. And then we have the scapula in the back that comes around, wraps around, and the scapula, the spine of the scapula comes in this direction. It forms a flatter surface. This is the acromion portion of the scapula. And where the clavicle and the acromion area meet, it is known as the acromion process. So clavicle, acromion process, and acromion. It's kind of a flat table-like surface. Dropping right below here, we have the coracoid process. This is also part of the scapula. Next, we come into this area. This entire area, this is the humerus. And some of the articulation points of the humerus are, here we have the greater tuberosity in this area. Now we have the lesser tuberosity. A couple other important things to note is right in here is the insertion point for the back muscles. For example, the latissimus dorsi and some of the other muscles that come from the scapula. And then on this section in here, this is an insertion point for the pectoral muscles. In particular, the clavicular portion of the pectoralis major would come across and it would insert into this area. This on the outside, on the lateral side, this is an insertion point for the deltoid muscle. So those are some important landmarks to keep in mind in terms of the muscle groups. So again, this entire area is the humerus. We drop down into the lower part of the humerus. And if we can see in here, this bony process that sticks out right here on the inside, that is the medial epicondyle, that portion of the humerus. On the outside here, we have the lateral epicondyle. Then these two rounded areas, on the inside, this portion is the trochlea. And on this section, this round, smooth area, this is the capitulum. So that, all of those are on the lower part of the humerus. Now we come down to the radius. We can see the radius real clear right through here. The top part, this is the head of the radius. And an interesting thing about this, and I like to keep in mind is how to keep track of it, is the radius will kind of rotate. It radiates across, so it is the radius. So again, here we have the head of the radius. This is the radius. Then we have the styloid process of the radius. And on the outside here, right in here, this is the styloid process of the ulna. And down here, if we can see this a little bit, right down in this area here, this is the head of the ulna. We'll be able to see the ulna a little clearer from some of the other angles, but basically this is the head of the ulna down here, and it heads on up toward the elbow. So that's the humerus, the radius, the ulna. Then we drop down to the hand, and we'll cover the hand in greater length in another section. These are the carpals, and there are 8 of the carpals. And after the carpals, we have the metacarpals, and in our fingers are the phalanges. So one thing that's a helpful thing to keep in mind that I'll remind you on and off through the series of these demonstrations and videos is there's one bone, followed by 2 bones, followed by lots of little bones, followed by digits. You can find that holds true in all the mammals, and that's a helpful thing to think of. If this was an animal and they were quadrupeds walking on all fours, the arm would be known as a forelimb, and the legs would be a hind limb. So this would be a forelimb if we were on all fours. But we are bipedal, and so we just usually refer to this as the upper extremity, and in this case, this is the anterior view of the upper extremity. And now we have the posterior view here of the upper extremity, posterior view of the arm, the shoulder area here. We have, again, the scapula, triangular shape. We have the spine of the scapula that comes across. And then we have the axillary border that runs along here. This bottom section is the inferior angle of the scapula. And then this is the supraspinous process, and this is the infraspinous process of the scapula. This comes here to the acromion. The acromion process is right up here, and that's where the scapula then connects to the clavicle and forms sort of a flat table on the top. Coming down to the arm, we have the humerus here, and we can see the greater tuberosity from the posterior view. We cannot see the lesser tuberosity, but we can see the greater tuberosity. This section here on the outside, this is the insertion point of the deltoid muscle. Then we drop down the humerus, and this section that comes out in here, this is the medial epicondyle of the humerus. This is the lateral epicondyle of the humerus. This section in here, this is known of the humerus. This portion up in here is known as the olecranon fossa. And the bone here, which is our ulna, this is the olecranon. This whole section is the ulna, but this is known as the olecranon. And it comes all the way down here, and this is the head of the ulna. Then we have, again in the hand, we have the carpal bones through here, we have the metacarpal bones, and then the fingers are made up of our phalanges. So that is basically sums up the posterior view of the upper extremity. Now we're covering the lateral view of the upper extremity, and we'll begin at the top. This that you see in here, this is the scapula. This is the spine of the scapula, comes here. This is the acromion. The acromion attaches and connects with the clavicle that comes right here. This where the connection point is known as the acromion process. So that's the acromion process, and then our clavicle. We see a little bit of the coracoid process in this area. Then we get here, this is the humerus bone. This bulbous part of the humerus up here at the top, that is known as the greater tuberosity. The little bony section we see emanating from the humerus right here, that is the lesser tuberosity. The back muscles would then connect up in this area and here. Then we would have the pectoral muscles connect somewhere in this area. This would be their insertion point. Back muscles insertion point a little higher. Pectoral muscles, in particular the clavicular portion of the pectoralis major, the insertion point is in here. And then right out here, this is where the insertion point would be for the deltoid muscle. Then we come down the humerus, and here on this section, this is the lateral view of the lateral epicondyle. We can now see the olecranon, which is up here, part of the top part of the ulna. The olecranon forms what is known as our elbow. So this is the ulna coming all the way down, and down here is the head of the ulna. The top section up here, this is the head of the radius, and it comes down here, and then we have the styloid process of the radius on this side and the styloid process of the ulna on the other side. Dropping down below, we have the carpals. There are 8 carpals. Then we have the metacarpals, and in the fingers we have the phalanges. So again, just to point out, we have 1 bone followed by 2 bones, followed by lots of little bones, followed by digits. Something that is very common that you can look for in pretty much all of the mammals. And that is the lateral view of the upper extremity.